Really good to see everybody here. We're really blessed to be joined by Ayan Yanaka, who's one of the senior bhikkhunis at Pasadi Vihara. Not so senior, but one of two bhikkhunis. So at Pasadi Vihara in Olympia, which you can all check out on their website, which is pasadivihara.org. Yes. How do you spell Pasadi? Passaddhi, Vihara, Vihara. So just a few announcements. Rahul, is Rahul here? Should we still make that announcement?
Sure, most people know me.
Okay. Yeah, for people who do know Rahul, you can talk to him. He's our new librarian. And so if you have extra Dhamma books that you'd like to give to the community for free distribution, you can give those to Rahul. And also if you're ever going down to Abhayagiri, just let him know. And yeah, maybe we can send some books with you down to Abhayagiri. Also, we've got a letter of thanks to David Leon, who's been helping us with our land search. And there's a card for him back on the table back there. So.
Additionally, we told you could check out Pasadi Vihara. You can even today if you want, because I and Yannicka, it would be helpful if we had a ride for her either back down that way or part way that way so she could they could catch a bus. If anyone is feeling up for some wonderful windshield time with a wonderful monastic, please come up and talk to Aya. And it would be good if people could do that right after we wrap up the talk, because Aya's departure time will depend on whether or not they have a ride. So, and Aya's great to get windshield time with. It is as extra blessing for the day. We also, as you'll see, we have this wonderful Saturday setup in the Triple Gym. It doesn't happen by itself. We really have this great team that sets things up and takes things down. We do need maybe 2 or 3 extra folks. It's not a big lift. Basically, you come a bit early on a Saturday around 8:40 and sometimes stay a little bit after. It doesn't even have to be every Saturday. But if you're willing to be part of that Saturday team, we would really appreciate it. And you can talk to Janaki, Aruna, or Gary, all of whom will raise their hands now. Gary, Janaki, Aruna, thank you. So please talk to them. And we've put this announcement out before and no one came forward. We really do need people to help out. This is a lot of chairs to put up. We also have this bulletin board, which we're hoping people can put up different gatherings that they're having, hosting dinners, things like that. Please, take advantage of it. We really want to encourage people to be connecting outside of these Saturdays. And we also have a WhatsApp group that's dedicated to that now, if you haven't signed up. And finally, we have to, usually our first Saturday of every month, we have a gathering for the volunteers in the back room. We'll have to postpone that this Saturday and have it next Saturday instead. So that special volunteer gathering, we're putting off 1 week.
Right. So the first Saturday of every month, we have an opportunity people have the opportunity to take the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts. So this is on page 128 in the chanting book. And yeah, this is, of course, totally optional. It's an opportunity to dedicate oneself to the Buddha, representation of awakening, to the Dhamma, his teachings, that which leads to awakening, and the Sangha, those beings who've practiced and lived the teachings, and then to take the 5 precepts, the basis of Buddhist morality, of not killing, not stealing, not committing sexual misconduct, not lying, and not taking intoxicants. And it's all voluntary and it's all fun. So I think we got Miles, will you? Or, oh, Dave, please.
Mayam bante tisarnena saha pancha silani yachama dutyampi mayam bante tisarnena saha pancha silani yachama Tatyampi mayam bante tisarnena saha pancha silani yachama.
This would be like a call and response. I'll do these page 128, the Namo Tassa 3 times, and you can do it 3 times afterwards. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Just one for one in this next Pali part. Buddhang saranang gacchami. Dhammang saranang gacchami. Sanghang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tisarana kamanang nititang. And we'll do these precepts in Pali and English. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. Adinna dana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which has not been given. Kame sumichachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct. Musawada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from lying. Sura meraya majjapamadadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness. Imani pancha sikkhapadani silena sugating yanti, silena boga sampada, silena nibuting yanti tasma silang visodhaye. Okay. And with that, I can lead us in meditation.
So we've just, yes? Okay. So we've just heard or recited the precepts, and you've come into this wonderful space together. And before we begin the meditation, I'm curious if you would check in. Do you feel like you've already got some stability, some centeredness, an open heart? Or maybe there's still a residue from the world. Anyone completely steady at this moment? See where our points of, no, okay. All right. I'm not going to raise my hand either. Anybody feeling a little bit still wobbled by the world, but maybe that the precepts give you something to hold on to? Yeah. Yeah. So, given that we live in a wobbly world, what we're, I'm getting better? No, use the other one. Better? Excellent. Thank you. Living in a wobbly world, what this meditation will be is to see if we can come into a little bit more centered, open, warm heartedness, so that as the world wobbles around us, there's a trustworthy place that the center is that sila, the precepts that we have. And I won't be talking about the precepts, but if you feel yourself wobbling, just come back to, I'm a person who doesn't harm. I'm a person who doesn't kill. Now, I'm a person who's living with integrity in this world where the world is wobbling. There is this trustworthiness. So at any point your mind begins to wander or the emotions begin to come up, you know that that's just wobbling around this center that's there for you, your precepts, your sila. So if you wish, you can physically notice, am I leaning forward a little, leaning back a little? You know, and actually go ahead and take yourself a little off balance and then let it come back into balance. It can be on the sides too, or the placement of your legs. Coming to a position that's relatively stable for now. One that doesn't take a lot of muscle to hold. And finding an uprightness that's not strained. You might strain it just a little bit, reaching up with your head, and then relaxing down the axes of your spine, letting the curves come in that are natural and supportive. Feeling the surface below you. Contact. That's stable for right now. Allowing the breath to move in and out. There's a trustworthiness to this right now. Noticing that the breath may be moving, through the nose or mouth and down into the lungs, but it also moves the belly. It actually moves the whole body as the body rests on the surface below you. Allow there to be a sense of the whole body breathing. And when our attention is tight on the object, notice the impact of that. So soften. It's a loose, curious gaze on the breath in the body. breathing is happening. Awareness is curious and present. Feeling the whole body breathe. And realizing this body is within the space around us. And for right now, we're in a relatively safe, stable, secure setting. There may be sounds that arise, there may be hums and sniffles and movement. But we have a sense that it's a safe space that these things are occurring within. Nothing that really requires a guard. But if you don't yet trust that, if that's not your experience right now, that's okay. We can be with that too, each one of us. And allow the breath to move as if it's leaving the body in all directions, taking up into this space around us. Whether we trust it to be safe or not out there, we're just expanding our field of awareness a little bit into the space around us. Rechecking the stability of the body itself for right now. The body breathing in space. Hearing sounds, feeling the sensation of the coolness or warmth, any sense, any touch on the skin. Just aware we're within this space with this group of people at this time, not conceptualizing it, just aware there is contact at the ear. If your eyes are slightly open, at the eye, the tastes in your mouth, the scent, the sensations on the skin. And this body is breathing. And if you wish, you can introduce some metta into the center of this breathing body near the heart space. Some loving friendliness, a warmth, a quality of deep appreciation and care. I care about this body. I care about this life. But the quality of caring is the kind of brightness that you see when you see a small, furry animal in all its cuteness, a happy child, a beautiful day. Now, these are conditioned things, but they come with a quality that tends to warm our heart, make it smile. So you can call that to mind or just cultivate the sensation itself of warmth, care, love. Perhaps continuing to allow the body to be soft and open, stable but free, spacious. And consider letting the warmth of your heart ride on the breath and completely take up that space, softly filling the whole body with this quality of warmth and smiling heart. And letting that smiling heart ride out beyond the bounds of the body into the space around. And today, just practicing within the confines of this auditorium, building up the toolkit of resilience and warmth and openness, steadiness. And as my voice goes quiet, taking up the cultivation within you, softly warm, smiling heart, riding on the breath to all the body and the space around. We'll continue for another 5 minutes or so. As we near the end of the meditation time, notice the qualities that are present now. Whatever amount of warmth is in the heart, whatever awareness there is to the breath, whatever amount of relaxation is in the body as we take up space. And know that as we transition to hearing the Dhamma and then talking with each other, these qualities can be a resource for us even then. We can listen and interact with this warmth and openness and ease. So consider as you wait and listen for the bell and then move into the time that's next, that this resource of a warm heart goes with you.
Anyone that wants to follow along with requesting a Dhamma talk, it's on page 124. Brahmachaloka dipati sahampati katanjalianam diwaram maya chata santi dasata Paraja kajatika dese tu dhammam anukapimam pajam.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Thank you, Aya, for the beautiful talk. So yesterday, I was talking to a member of the community who said she'd just moved here and woke up each morning wondering what was the goal of her day, what she should do next, and this feeling of disorientation, of not knowing if she was living a life worthy of her death, and wondering, what do I do? Do I, go and make sort of the bodhisattva determinations? Do I take on a new project? How does one align their life to Dhamma? And how do you navigate those liminal spaces in life between the bardo states, as the Tibetans call them, between death and a new birth? And the Tibetan Book of the Dead talks about these states as very disorienting. There's flashes of light, and one often sees such a glimmer and fixates on it, and then a new birth happens. And this is the danger of or the difficulty with those in-between spaces is the temptation to reach for something new, a new birth, a new project, when really what we need to do is listen. And the Buddha said in one of the suttas, Majjhima Nikaya 48, the strength of one with right view is that when the Dhamma is being taught, they lend ear, listen. And what a beautiful idea that our strength is our willingness and ability to listen to Dhamma. Mother Teresa was asked what she did when she prayed, and she said, I listened to God. And they said, what does he say? And she said, he listens back. And the word savaka, disciple in Buddhism, means one who listens. One who listens. Every sutta begins with the words, thus have I heard. And Ajahn Chah, Longpo Chah famously said, you don't need to read a bunch of books to understand Dhamma. Nature is teaching you everything you need to know. The trees can teach you enough. We'd have to be really good to take that advice completely literally. You should keep coming to Saturdays and reading Dharma books. But this idea that if we knew how to listen, that would guide us. This verse from Kings in the Bible, first there was the fire and God was not in the fire. Then there was the lightning and God was not in the lightning. Then there was the thunder and God was not in the thunder. And then there was a still small voice. And there was a still small voice. And this subtle voice of Dhamma and intuitive awareness that guides us if we make space in our life to listen to where it's taking us and the restraint it takes to hold still long enough for that voice to have room to speak, so we don't jump into a new thing, so we don't fixate on the glimmering lights and become drawn into a new birth. And the melody, the notes we need to listen to, the Buddha gave us very clearly. Some of you, most of you, have probably heard of the Four Noble Truths. And many of you have heard us talk about how it's important with each. We often take the Four Noble Truths coming from an Abrahamic biblical tradition as statements of ontological fact. There is suffering, or life is suffering, for the first. When what the Buddha really told us to or how he told us to interact with the truths is as tasks, things to be done. So the first noble truth of dukkha, stress, suffering, unsatisfactoriness, one is to comprehend. The second noble truth, craving, unwholesome thirst, tanha, one is to abandon. The third noble truth is the cessation of dukkha, nirodha, one is to realize peace, nibbana. And the fourth, the path leading to that cessation of dukkha, of stress, the path, the Noble Eightfold Path, one is to develop. And these are ordered the way they are for many reasons, one of which is that's the traditional Ayurvedic means of ordering things as you lay out the symptoms, the diagnosis, the prognosis. But what's so important about these truths is they give us a way of interacting with every state that comes. There's an experiment called Dish Brain where they taught a bunch of brain cells to play Pong. They got really good, actually. But how they rewarded the brain cells, how they punished them when they didn't play the Pong well, was they played a bunch of flashing electronic bursts. And when the brain cells did well, they rewarded them by playing very regular bursts. We search for regularity. We search for control, for understanding. And the Four Noble Truths is the simplest framework that allows us to metabolize and understand and orient towards that most difficult piece of entropy in a life, the fact of dukkha, the etymology of dukkha. There's many different etymologies you'll hear. One is a wheel that's always a little off. Du means bad. Ka means the hub of a wheel. So if you've ever had one of those squeaky shopping carts that just kind of keeps leaning to the right and crashing into the laundry detergent. That is our life. Or du bad stra from the Sanskrit, which means to stand. So something that never quite stands upright. It's always lilting one way or the other. And this is a significant way of looking at the fact that how do we orient towards that fact that samsara, the conditioned realm, is broken? It's a liquid we constantly reach into looking for a solid. Carl Jung said that everyone he gave treatment to after the age of 30, their core problem was lack of a spiritual framework. Now, for those with childhood trauma and things, obviously that's a factor. I don't know if I'd stand by those words completely, but if you have no way of metabolizing, of interacting, of ordering and orienting towards dukkha, what do you do but run and waver and flee and move? The Buddha said impermanence, movement, or maybe it was one of the great teachers, movement obscures dukkha. We're constantly moving to run from our suffering. Try sitting still for 30 minutes. Try lying down without moving for 30 minutes and you will feel pain. So whether it's the phone, the new relationship, the new career, we move to obscure dukkha. And to understand that that first orientation, the first noble truth, one way you can understand why it was put first is because it is the quintessential element we keep missing and running from. There was a teacher, Frank Ostaseski, teaching the Four Noble Truths in Idaho, and someone raised their hand in the audience and said, "It's like telephone poles." And Frank said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I used to work installing telephone poles." And the foreman said, "If this pole starts to fall, which way do you run?" And he said, "Well, you run away." And the foreman said, "No, you run right up to the pole and put your hands on it. That's where you know which way it will fall. That's the safest place." There's a story of Chogyam Trungpa with a kind of entourage of monks entering a Tibetan monastery with these Tibetan mastiffs that usually serve as the guard dogs. And one mastiff broke its chain and ran at the entourage. And everyone else ran away, but Chogyam Trungpa ran straight at the dog, and it got scared and just ran away from him. So what does it mean to carefully turn towards suffering, to comprehend it? We have no trouble opening to our happiness. That's easy. But these Four Noble Truths provide the most simple framework of orienting towards dukkha. And when the Buddha defines dukkha, he says, birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, sickness is dukkha, death is dukkha, not attaining one's wishes is dukkha, separation from the liked is dukkha, separation from association with the disliked is dukkha. In brief, the five aggregates of identity are dukkha, are clinging, suffering, stress. And this word, people have taught the First Noble Truth in various contexts, and people come up and say, I don't suffer that much. And then this is Ajahn Jeff said, are you stressed ever? And they said, oh yeah, I'm stressed all the time. So dukkha, it runs the gamut. It can be minor stress. It can be a sense of incompleteness. Someone in this community was recently saying they were watching football and saw an incomplete pass, and they're like, that's Dhamma, incompleteness, the incomplete pass. But it's also sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. It is the depths of hell and the most subtle variations of heaven. It is this quintessential fact of entropy. And the fact that even the happiest things in our lives, we can't depend on feeding off a changeable world for dependable happiness. And one of the biggest things I see go wrong is that when life shifts between the third, fourth, first, and second noble truth, these are the notes that play out in our life. They ring out. And so often when we've had a bright moment, we've had a good phase of the third and fourth noble truth, things are going well, we have a good sit, we have a nice gathering, we have a good retreat. We want to ride that note. We want to keep dancing and aligning with that note, even when the first and second noble truths make their appearance again. And that's the mistake, because the first and second noble truths do assert themselves, and the dance is different to that note. The orientation towards that note, the way we listen to it, is different. The Buddha said patient endurance is the supreme incinerator of defilement, the cleansing flame. And Longpo Sumedho, famously talked about it as patient endurance is peaceful coexistence with the unwished for. And to know that when the first noble truth manifests, when suffering rings out again, our orientation is to understand it, to comprehend it, to lay careful and caring hands on that fact and our vulnerability associated with it and our craving, and to not act from it. I call this practice the slow boil, because when you're in that place, often all you can do is keep your head down and make it through the next wave. The storm can hit hard, and the impetus in those moments of suffering, of uncertainty, of doubt, of anger is to react. We want to look over those rough seas and see a landmark. But when the seas are rough enough, all you can see is the next gigantic wave. And so ironically, in those moments where you most want to find something to fix your whole life, a new relationship, a set of new determinations, you want to look to that horizon. Actually, the correct orientation is to come right back to your heart right here and see your intention. Just steer into the next wave. Just hold still enough to steer into the next wave and keep your rudder straight. And often these sorts of suffering aren't the kind of suffering you can say, well, I'll work with this. Sometimes these moments of pain, even stuff over what seems so trivial, being left out again, these ancient wounds that are deep, lifetimes old, to know that the correct orientation towards them is to comprehend, to be with them through that. And sometimes you have to let that sort of suffering work on you. You don't get to work on it. It works on you. And just to bow to the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, and let that kind of wash over you. And what you'll see is if you hold still enough, there is a majesty on the other side of that first noble truth. The third and fourth do come. There is the reprieve. I was recently in a long car ride with someone from the community who was just having a really hard day. And if you've ever had a really hard day and then been locked in a car with people for 8 hours, it is at least some level of the hellish realms. And you could see this person really working with it, just kind of being, that was the crucible. And yet this person did not, you could tell the amount of restraint that was going into holding that tension in herself and that fire. And honestly, at the end of that day, it was a noble endeavor. There was a sense of this person had made it through something deeply humbling. And Richard Rohr said that before 30, you need some success, but everything he learned after 30 was from failure. He also said that his one prayer every day was, Lord, humble me. And that's one of mine too, except Lord means, the Buddha in this case, or the universe, etc., Dhamma. But to know that when this first noble truth works on you, you can feel the humbling happen. The path is a spiral staircase up and a spiral staircase down. But to know that, to hear that note and to reorient correctly, and to know when you're in a first and second noble truth day or month or year, because if your heart's strong, if it's been nourished with Dhamma, you can bet that the Dhamma will then throw at you some first and second noble truth. The last thing you can take from people is our suffering. And when you've had moments of beauty, of refinement, it's like being up on a high mountaintop in thin air, and you'll start to flail. And the thing you'll reach for is your suffering, is the old pattern of anger because of the flesh of self and knowing what you are. The self forms in the shadow of desire. And this is a second noble truth. Dukkha originates from tanha, craving. And the Buddha says, what is craving? Craving to become, no, sensual craving, craving for sensuality, pleasant sights, smells, touches, tastes, sounds. Craving to become, that flush of ego, of a new job, of a new relationship, of birth, of anger. There's so much becoming in anger. And the craving not to become, vibhava tanha. And that's one worth singling out because people miss it. Yes, it can manifest as these deep-rooted patterns of suicidal ideation in many, but it can be much more. It can be an inclination, or much less. It can be an inclination towards sleep, towards blanking out. It can be the part of you which binges or becomes addicted. That looks like sensual craving on the surface, but it's really the craving for annihilation. And just to see what is that hunger that's drawing you out again? What is leading to craving or suffering? And to know that the path is not about just cutting off craving, cutting off our interaction with the world. Tanha means thirst, but there's another kind of desire in Buddhism called chanda, and it means zeal, enthusiasm, this part of us which wants to make things whole. That concept in Judaism about the world being broken into 100 shattered, bright pieces and us trying to put them together. Granted, in the Buddhist framework, that's never going to completely happen in the samsaric realm, only in the heart. But that desire to make things whole, to build something beautiful, to practice Dhamma, that's chanda. And the path is one of giving up this craving of feeding, of tanha, which is based so often on momentary indulgence, sensuality, the dopamine or the serotonin system, probably more so, to one more based on blessing, on creating something beautiful, chanda. And that as we practice, for every Netflix subscription you cancel, for every root of tanha you cut off, of this thirst, to be very conscious to replace it with some means of chanda, of zeal, of beautiful enthusiasm. You know, for every Netflix subscription you cancel, are you hosting a dinner for loved ones? Are you taking on some means of poetry or art? Are you giving gifts? Are you volunteering? This is how we feed the heart, because you can't just cut off from the world. You do have to continue to interact and bless it. And Longpo Dun, one of the famous teachers in Thailand, had a different way of articulating the Four Noble Truths. He said, the mind going outside of itself is the cause of dukkha. The mind watching itself is the root to the cessation of dukkha. So all those forms of craving, you can feel the impetus to go out. And it takes such an act of restraint just to sit still long enough for something else to happen. I quoted last week the T.S. Eliot verse from Four Quartets. You are not ready for love would be love for the wrong thing. You're not ready for hope would be hope for the wrong thing. There is yet faith, but the faith and the hope and the love are all in the waiting. And to know that a lot of practice is just not reacting. Just knowing that when you come out of the retreat, there's probably going to be some deep dukkha coming, and then your job is to hold still and feel through it and let that slow crucible act on you, and to have faith that the Dhamma will apply heat in measure to the instrument it wants to forge you into. When there are times to interact with those first and second noble truths just to endure, to get through it. But if you're able to have gratitude for those moments which push our hearts wider, we all know people whose hearts have never really opened, and it's like porcelain. And the root through suffering, the Buddha said, feeling is the meeting place, and dukkha is where we meet If you're angry at someone, if there's aversion, if there's bafflement, trace back to their suffering, to their Vedana. Amen. And find the compassion hidden there, because you are opening through that first noble truth to a universal bond that we are in Buddhism. In Buddhist countries, they will refer to people, to each other, as our brothers and sisters in birth, aging, and death. And there's a sweetness to that, actually, of this is your family, and this is where we come to compassion. So to know that if you're able to really have gratitude for those people that push you to be more patient, to be more kind, to be more humble, this is the route to a bigger heart. If we didn't have those people, we would just continue to weave our hearts in with this changeable, fragile realm, and we'd never look towards a greater refuge. There's a practice in, I think, Indonesia, where they'll put curtains in front of doors to block demons, because they say that demons can't travel in straight lines, or demons can only travel in straight lines, so they'll run into the curtain. And someone I know in my life said, what if traveling in a straight line makes us all into demons? And it's true. If things are going well, you don't think twice. Dukkha can be a gift. And granted, the language I used of the Dhamma applying heat in measures the instrument it wants to forge you into, there's the language of teleology, of purpose, of personalization there, which doesn't totally fit in the Dharmic framework. But the Four Noble Truths are a self-fulfilling prophecy if you interact with the first and second noble truth as a gift, as a moment to humble yourself. I have never seen a limit to how wide and spacious that can open the heart. I've never seen a limit to that end. And granted, usual caveats, people in deep moments of distress as children, etc., who don't have access to these tools, it's a different picture. But for you who have and possess right view, who know how to listen for that note, there is a way of dancing to that note, even if it's just doing a bunch of full-length prostrations and letting that dukkha and pain wash over you. The third noble truth, the cessation of dukkha, peace, Nibbana. Someone once asked Michelangelo how he got a sculpture of a horse out of a piece of stone, how he carved a piece of stone into this sculpture. And he said, the horse was always there. I just chipped away everything that wasn't the horse. And people see Buddhism and they think these articulation of the Four Noble Truths are morbid or life-denying. Why do we talk about dukkha so much? Suffering. And it's because it's so hard to articulate what peace is. What is good health but lack of illness? How do you articulate it? And so the Buddha wasn't giving us this ontological structure. He was talking about, this is practice, is let go of that which is not worthy of your heart, not worthy of your clinging. Let go of that first noble truth and the second of craving until you come to what's beyond all grasping. And when you get there, you'll know it, and it's beautiful. It's sanctuary, and it's not nothing. The Buddha said the Nibbana element is like the sea. No matter how many beings enter it, it never overflows its borders. It never goes up and down. This is not a path to lower your blood pressure. This is not a path to become vaguely more well-adjusted in your life, although it serves those means. The goal the Buddha laid out was complete freedom from suffering. The idea that there is a state beyond the normal human heart. And I remember when I was in high school looking desperately for anyone in my life who had something different about them, because I knew where this life led without practice, and how big of a sample size do you need, you know? And I just wanted one person. And then I saw a video of Ajahn Chah. It's The Mindful Way. It's a 5-minute video clip on YouTube, or at least this part of it is. And it's him, just an interview with Longpo Cha, the father of our tradition, a monk of last century. And Paul Breider, when he met Longpo Cha, said, he seemed just like a frog on his lily pad, completely happy. And I thought I would do anything to be like that. And I felt the same way. When you meet a being like that, who seems selfless and pure, how can it not shake you? How can it not reorient everything you've thought your life was for? Because depression and addiction and the vicissitudes of our hearts and distraction, there's a wisdom behind it often. And it is the intuition that the goals we have been held up are not worthy of our hearts or our lives or our deaths. So of course we fracture ourselves. The Dhamma is the only stream that I've ever found deep enough to hold the whole of my heart and purpose. If you found it, do not waste that stream bed. And granted, it can be hard to believe that beings like this exist, but we've all seen the Dalai Lama. It's almost cliche to say, but really, people are capable of this, Westerners. And the Buddha, when he talked about, he was asked about the Nibbana element often. And in one exchange with a wanderer named Vacchagotta says, when a Tathagata, a Buddha, passes away, do they exist? Do they not exist? And then just to cover his bases, he says, do they both exist and not exist? And do they neither exist nor not exist? That's the classic Buddhist tetralemma. And the Buddha says, does not apply. And Vacchagotta is confused. And the Buddha says, look, any material, what a Tathagata sees is this material form, this consciousness, this feeling, this perception, these mental activities, the 5 aggregates of identity. The Tathagata sees them arise and pass away and does not cling to any of them. That form, that feeling, that perception, that mental activity, that consciousness by which the Tathagata might be measured, the Tathagata has done away with, cut off like a palm tree stump, deprived of the conditions for further existence. The Tathagata is deep and immeasurable like the ocean. Vacchagotta, this flame, if I extinguished it, would you say it had gone north? No, Lord. If I asked it, did it go west? Would you say it had gone west? No, Lord. And so on. What would you say, Vacchagotta? I would say none of these apply. East, north, south, west do not apply. It is simply reckoned as out. Even so, Vacchagotta, an enlightened being, is beyond classification. And in coming from a North European culture, we hear about an extinguishment of a fire and it into its death and darkness. But these teachings were given in the Ganges River Valley, where it is really hot. And there was a concept in Buddhism, and Ajahn Thanissaro goes into this in Mind Like Fire Unbound, where there's a concept of agi, this fire element that pervades the cosmos, basically. And that when fire went out, it was released from this place of agitated, bound clinging into a place of cool light. And when the Buddha was pushed to give one analogy for the enlightened mind, he said, it's light that lands on nothing. Light that lands on nothing. So to know this is possible, I feel like I've met people, lay people in the US who are stream enters, who have touched the first level of awakening, who have encountered the deathless and been changed irrevocably by that. And then the 4th noble truth of the path to this end, right view and so on. And to know that once we've held still through the suffering, there does come a point of reprieve, of spaciousness, of clarity, the 3rd noble truth. And that's where you make your plans from. That's where you decide what's next. From those moments of clarity, can you determine what your life worthily lived would look like? What does that mean? How many minutes a day should you be sitting? How are you going to structure your relationships, your days, your weeks, your months, such that this life is not wasted? That is the 4th noble truth, orienting on the 8-fold path. And though the temptation is to jump into that planning and that solving from those places of suffering and reactivity and doubt, to know that that's not the time to do it. Hold still in those moments. But then when that hidden majesty occurs on the other side of that dark valley. That's that spaciousness. That's where you do take time to structure a life worthy of your death of these teachings of duty. And just to finally say that the Buddha was pushed as to what sukha and dukkha meant in certain situations, pleasure and suffering. There's a debate between this monk and a carpenter named Panchakanga, where one's saying the Buddha taught 3 kinds of feeling, and the other says he taught 2. And the Buddha's asked about this, and he says, both are right. I've taught 2 kinds of Vedana. I've taught 3. I've taught 5. I've taught 6. I'm not sure about the 5. He definitely taught 6. And basically, he then goes through this crescendo where he talks about how he gives these circular definitions of pleasure, where he says at the end, he goes through each jhana and these deep states of concentration and the pleasure that comes from it. And then finally says, in nibbana, this is the ultimate sukha, the ultimate pleasure. And this idea that as we practice, our picture of what is suffering and happiness just changes, and to watch as that refines and sublimates. And soon the movies you were going to aren't as beautiful or as pleasurable as just being with friends, going for a walk, and eventually how we can relinquish everything but giving to the Dhamma, to ourselves, to duty, to those around us, the happiness of them, of the world, and of our own well-being, and in service of a world that desperately needs those intent on purity of heart to hold it through difficult and fraught times. So to know that as Savaka, as hearers, as listeners, whose strength is in listening, this is our goal. This is our orientation. It's not to make any enormous and in the moment determinations to orient our lives haphazardly or in too rushed a manner. It's to listen carefully. Which note is playing, and therefore which movement of the heart, of the mind, of life should you be working with? Which dance should you be doing? Even though on the 8 precepts, you're not allowed to dance. Okay, Sadhu. So we have time for questions. Sorry, that talk went a bit long, but people can, in the meantime, stand up, move around a little bit if you've been sitting for long. There's restrooms back there and back there in the hall. And also just a special welcome to Olive and Alex, Matthew's friends visiting from Eugene, I think, over here. And welcome you too. And also to Dan, Melissa, and Ali, who are joining from Winthrop. I think I got all the names right. Welcome. And many others who I didn't know to mention. I'm sorry. Okay. Please raise your hand if you'd like a mic run over to you, and you can ask your question. If you're on Zoom, you can raise your electronic hand. And feel free to, just bring anything up that's on your mind.
Thank you. I'm curious about how to make sure that our earnestness for Dhamma and practice doesn't turn into suffering. For example, like one thing I'm dealing with right now is trying to fit in as many retreats as possible within my work schedule. And it gets to the point where it's like, I'm very stressed about it. Like I'm hoarding sick days at work. I won't stay home when I'm sick because I'm trying to save them all up for retreats, and it feels like I'll be sitting in meditation and it's almost like my brain needs to latch on to like this future planning mode of setting my life up, be in alignment with the Dhamma, but then it even just takes me out of where I am in the presence. So I'm curious about how to make sure, like this eagerness doesn't just become another form of looking for something else on the horizon.
So I think you've already identified what it feels like as you're grasping after Dhamma. There is a wholesome will for Dhamma. It will have a different flavor. So when you can feel yourself falling into the flavor of kind of a franticness or an agitation or despair, I can't scrape together enough. What am I doing? Okay, I see it on your face. It's, you are in touch with the Vedana, the feeling tone, and you can really sense, is this wholesome? And drop it. Drop the agitation, drop the striving. And what comes about, like the way we did the meditation today, of coming into a centered, spacious, warm-hearted. So the preparations for going on retreat, the preparations to hear the Dhamma should have the same qualities of that kind of meditation. And when it begins to get tight, you can actually apply that to the tightness itself. So there's a chance right there to, as Ajahn Nisabo was talking about, dukkha. Now, so there's this squeaky off balanced wheel trying to carry you toward the Dhamma. Stop and be with the Dhamma that's right there, right then. So it is possible to do planning with a spacious and open and free heart. This may work out, this may not work out. Oh, there's a lot of moving parts here, and you'll have more energy and resourcedness to attend to it if you're open, spacious, warm-hearted, and free. You'll also be able to discern, is this my best gift to myself to hoard this day for a future retreat? Or should I take a retreat at home today because it's a sick day? So other responses?
I think the talk, by the way, Ajahn, that was very beautiful, and I personally felt that something that I needed to hear. My question is, I think I heard somewhere the Buddha said, good friends are the whole part of holy life. So what attributes or what qualities I should be looking into people I'd like to consider as my friends to maybe minimize my suffering to the max, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great quote and a great question. And yeah, the phrase is Kalyana Mitta. So Mitta, which is related to Maitri, so friends, friendliness, loving kindness, the friends who are beautiful friendship, spiritual friendship. And yeah, the Buddha had a list of 7 qualities to look for. And I can only remember one of them. So you're going to have to look it up yourself. But people who you can respect, which is a big thing. You know, yeah, you want to be able to respect your friends and have things that you can look up to in your friends. There's a sutta where the Buddha talks about if you find yourself lacking in generosity, if you find that you're stingy, then you should go and look out and find friends who are generous, and then watch them and learn from them and be generous with them and give things with them and see how they are generous. If you look and find that you're lacking in integrity, or your sense of morality is not really doesn't have a foundation to it, then look and find people who have a very deep sense of integrity and study with them. You know, just being around people like that has an impact. Similarly with wise people and with people who have this sense of faith, a sense of confidence in the type of spiritual framework that Ajahn was talking about. Someone who has a intuitional and a really deep-rooted sense of the Four Noble Truths, that this is the path that's going to lead to my own suffering, and here's how I cause it, and here's how I don't have to do that. So yeah, that's the kind of friends that we want and we can learn from. Maya, or?
I also just do not memorize lists well, but you will find it in the Anguttara Nikaya, multiple ones. Bhikkhu Bodhi has the book Social and Communal Harmony, which is a collection of suttas, and there's a whole chapter in there of collected suttas on friendship. So I would highly recommend finding that as a resource. The main thing is, are the qualities that I'm trying to cultivate growing in me when I'm in association with these people, with this person, with this environment? Or are the kilesas, the things that are detrimental to my practice, is that what's growing when I'm in association with this person, these people, this environment? I know in a couple of weeks, you've got a great sutta on that coming up in regards to a teacher on your mission Majjhima. So you can check in there, but check in with the heart within yourself. What is growing when I am in association with these people, this person, this environment? And is this what I want to be cultivating? And you can also be a good friend. What am I helping cultivate in others?
Anyone who wants to be Sid's friend, he's sitting there. He's great. That guy. Mary, please.
Hi. Thank you for the beautiful meditation, Aya, and for the beautiful talk, Ajahn Nisabo. I have a rather academic question. I'm not sure it's appropriate, but it has to do with this contemplation I've been doing lately, trying to understand mental processes. And when you talked about the mind watching itself, questions arose that I've been looking at. So when you said the Buddha said that his consciousness had been obliterated, I've been working a lot with consciousness of. So I'm thinking it was probably the sense door consciousness that was obliterated. Where I get confused, and this is the real question, is we talk about awareness of, we talk about knowing. Are these, I had a talk with Aya Ahimsa, and she was wondering whether, we kick this around. Is consciousness of the same thing as awareness? This is where it gets academic, so I'm sorry if it's inappropriate. But looking at the mind processes, is knowing different than awareness, is different than consciousness of? Do your best, guys and women.
So it's a great question, Mary. Some of you will know this story of an anthropologist he was visiting some remote tribe and learning about their belief system. And they had a belief that the world was sitting on the back of a turtle. And he said, "What is the turtle standing on?" And they said, "Another turtle." And they said, "Well, what's that?" And they said, "Look, it's turtles all the way down." And just to say that, you're pointing to a real, first, consciousness in the five aggregates, vijnana, is often construed as specifically sense consciousness of the senses. And that debate about whether nibbana, final awakening, after the body is gone, occurs with consciousness or not is, trust me, you can find long threads on Sutta Central about that question. And similarly, people often point to this idea of chitta, the mind or heart, like, what is that? It's, Longpor Suchitta would say it's the subject of experience that knows. It's like a pond, and when it's wavy, the chitta that's agitated, you can see the waves, but as it gets calm, wisdom emerges like the reflective surface of a pond. I've heard many teachers say, look, you can only go so far because trying to know chitta as an object is like a knife trying to cut itself. And so I'd say that, the knowing and consciousness of, that is usually how the Buddha talked about how to conceive of the knowing of something. And the mind knowing the mind, Ajahn Sona says it's just fast enough to play tennis with itself, but I don't even know if that's an accurate way to put it. What I would say is, I think you do reach an asymptote of understanding around language, around where we talk about the subject, the chitta and enlightenment. And the Buddha was very clear. He was pushed constantly on, does a Tathagata exist after death? What is that state? And he constantly said, he refused to really answer because any concept wouldn't be enough. The one framework I have heard that's very useful, although it doesn't hit to the heart of what you're asking, is the idea of manas, which is intellect. So like some elements that the Buddha pointed to, of nama, of mentality. The pinky represents in one conception, feeling, perception, middle finger's intention, contact, attention. And those are the 5 fingers. And they grab objects and press them into the palm, which is the chitta, which tastes experience. And when the mind is in samadhi, there's no object, but all the nama elements are in a fist. They're all bound into the chitta in a state of unity. But as to what enlightenment is, I don't know. There is a difference between sati, mindfulness, and sampajanya, clear awareness, but that is perhaps not something I can go into right now because I just talked for a long time.
Thank you.
So I think Prajnaparamita is more Mahayana, but is there something similar in Theravada?
Yeah, I mean, the words prajna and paramita have Pali correlates. So it's panya paramita, the highest type of wisdom. And you could just take that in Pali if one believes that the Buddha had the highest wisdom, that he was speaking the highest wisdom. And yeah, the Prajnaparamita Sutra, especially the Heart Sutra itself, is really, it goes beyond what most Pali suttas, what most Theravada suttas go to. There's one point when it says, not only is there no eye, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no contact with all those, but also there's no dukkha, no cause of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no way leading to the cessation of suffering, no liberation. So basically the opposite of what Ajahn Nisabo was talking about. There's no Four Noble Truths. And yet, I think it's talking to that asymptote. So an asymptote is basically where a curved line will not ever reach, like say you got a parabola, like a curved line. It's never going to touch this vertical line here. It's going to get closer and closer, but it's never going to touch. And similarly, like language, specifically the Pali Theravada language, the Buddha never, in the Pali Canon, never goes up and says exactly what's said in that Heart Sutta. He does say that you can hold on to as your foundation the Four Noble Truths. But what the Prajnaparamita Sutta is talking to is a really useful principle, is that you can't, no Dhamma is worthy of clinging to. That's a teaching that the Buddha gave to Mahamoggallana. No Dhamma is worthy of clinging to. So we hold to the Four Noble Truths as good as it gets, as foundational as we can do. But even that, we can't cling to it. So
when we were at Sarvasti, we always got really quiet during that little part of that sutta. I mean, there might be, yeah.
Thank you for the talk. It seems to me as though you should never try to tempt the Four Noble Truths. I came to meditation this morning. I've had really good meditation for the last 3 to 4 weeks, just never missing a breath, and just so comfortable. And I was really looking forward to today. This was miserable. I could not keep on my breath more than 2 times before I was falling asleep. I got a good night's sleep. So can you talk more about tempting the Four Noble Truths and how that seems to get one in trouble? I know that's not an easy question.
I think that when you set an expectation, which I think might be a way to tempt the noble truths, as you're putting it, when you set an expectation, then of course it's a setup. So instead, what we set are intentions. We set our attitude. So aligning with the Four Noble Truths. It's not like, and this truth is going to arrive now. I'm going to have cessation. This truth, I'm going to go into that situation and it's going to just really be dukkha. Whenever we set an expectation, then you are putting a valence toward it. The person I was staying with, we were talking about, what neighborhoods and you might be in and what experiences you might have there. And we were just reveling in how many great people we met in those neighborhoods because we weren't expecting to meet something that that neighborhood might be associated with in the press. And I think it's the same thing with the Noble Truths. If you go into your experience with an expectation of, I am going to be seeing this, I'm going to be on this part of the path, I'm going to be, based on my experience, I'm this close to Nibbana, you're going to start to get smacked about by reality, because reality is ever changing. If instead you have an open, warm, spacious, stable stance of you're stable around the pole of your sila, you trust in your integrity, and then you walk in with the whatever truth is going to be present is what's going to be present, then there will be an ease and a flow. And it's just perfectly fine to have a meditation where you've got the nods and what breath. So it's about intention, not expectation.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, please. One more question over here.
Way over there.
It's on. I just returned on Tuesday from 6 weeks at Insight Meditation Society, and it was hard for me to re-enter the world here, and was feeling a lot of dukkha surrounding and inside of myself. And I just wanted to say thank you, Aya, for the meditation instructions today, because opening my heart to the feelings of dukkha that pervade our existence just allowed me to release something. And I feel so grateful for the Sangha here and for the teachings that you are sharing. And I guess I don't know if it's a question exactly. I just see that, being out in the real world again, it's really nice to see that there's Sangha here and so many different ways to learn the teachings. I guess I'm just wondering if there's any advice on how to move forward, being in the suffering of this daily life.
Welcome back and thank you. First, just to really take care of yourself in this period. 6 weeks is a long time, and to be very okay with taking a lot of space for yourself, and to know how long it can take to readjust. I would also say, expect, if the retreat was bright, expect that your heart has a lot of dominance. So you might get a few dukkha days, or maybe a dukkha 6 weeks to really balance things out. Maybe not, but just that's okay. Just have compassion for yourself and hold yourself through that. I would also really just try to create a container in your day-to-day life, a lot orienting around Dhamma. A lot of us do 28 prostrations to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha every morning. That's a really good thing. And you can kind of pray spontaneously to set intention, may my heart be pure, may I keep good sila today, etc. And also, if you're trying to keep a meditation object like the breath or the body in mind for daily life, it's quite difficult sometimes. It's like you're splitting awareness all the time. the Brahma Viharas, loving kindness, has a different quality. It almost infuses the attention itself, so that it's like, instead of trying to shine two flashlights different directions, you just have one flashlight, but it's a really loving flashlight. So I found that there's a quality when you go into the world hoping to serve it, hoping to be there really with someone. You know, maybe you're not always with your breath, but you can emerge from quite a lot of activity without much residue. So I'd lean into the Brahma Viharas right now, and don't neglect self-compassion during this period. A lot of that. So like, hand on the heart, may I be well. And just, yeah, you know, sometimes after a retreat, it's like a scab has been ripped off a bit, and just let yourself enter slowly and care for that wound. It's a strange analogy. Okay.
All of the practical things that Ajahn Nispo said, especially that shining the metta flashlight on it, is wonderful. I want to take up the one word choice you used of, what did you say, going forward, or what was, yeah, the moving forward. I unfortunately, I lost the exact wording you had, but it made me think of what do we do to cross the flood? It isn't by pushing forward or by standing still. It's a different quality, and it's building up that resilience, caring for the resilience and all of the amazing tools of Dhamma that infuse your heart right now. So it's taking good care of that and allowing the movement of your actions into the world to be directed from that, rather than it being, so it's a responsiveness from the resources of Dhamma you've cultivated, as opposed to a directedness of mind to solving and integrating. And, you know, integration happens. You don't integrate. And it will come naturally from the Dhamma that you're building, or has been built. Building happened. It's happening.
Okay, so we'll wrap up the morning. Trenton or Kabir, could you read the blessing braid? This is names of people in our extended community who we're just trying to keep in mind.
We have Gladys Parmenter, long deceased of bowel issues. She was neglected by her son who lived with her. Ice Guang Tofu, tree fell on and destroyed house, spread meta. Christy B, passed away recently due to cancer after diagnosis weeks earlier. Ananda Krishnan, just passed, spread meta for a good rebirth. Shannon, lost her job.
And is there anyone else? People can raise their hand if you want to bring someone else into the space. Gail. Daisy, Ricardo. Thank you. And Jen. Jen, Pat, and family. Bonnie. Bim, who broke their arm. Thank you. Yeah, Rick. Joe, who died suddenly. Yeah, please. Fred, who passed a couple weeks ago. Yep. David. Okay, we can sit with those names, keep them in our hearts for the next little bit. On page 33, this is the verses of sharing and aspiration, where we can take all this feeling that we've been considering towards all these other people in our extended community and share the goodness from a morning well spent. Now let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, and through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and illusion be dispelled.
A few things. We'll have the potluck now. For those who want, please share some food with one another. There's name tags in the back. Once again, there's a card for David Leon, who helped us with the land search. Please sign it and express our gratitude as a community. We do have to get Aya. You saw how wonderful they are. If anyone is willing to drive at least partway to Olympia to get them to a bus at least, that'd be great. It's a really good opportunity. Please come and talk to them. If you want to be Sid's friend, he's there. He's awesome. Good. For those on Zoom, stick around for Zoom coffee hour. And Ajahn Kovilo and I will be here briefly, but we actually have to go sign some cards. So we'll only be here briefly, and then you can approach Aya here. Finally, if you're interested in helping with Saturday, we really could use the help. Aruna, Janaki somewhere over there, and Gary are the people you would talk to in that case. Ajahn.
All right, there's food in the back, and you can all share it together, and hope everybody has a great day. Yep, Doug. Check the corkboard back there for QR codes, game nights. And for those who want, we can bow, and as always, no pressure. You can wave goodbye to the Zoom people, and Zoom people can stay on with each other if you'd like. All right.